What remains after a life has become history? In the first part of this series, we visited the resting places of 7 legendary artists and discovered that even the most famous lives often end in surprisingly simple ways. But not every artist was granted a peaceful or permanent grave. Some of the figures we're about to discuss were buried in places that no longer exist. Some left behind remains whose identities are still debated. Others vanished into history so completely that we can only guess where they truly rest. Today, we're exploring 7 more final resting places connected to some of the greatest artists who ever lived. From Leonardo da Vinci and Rembrandt to Gustav Klimt, Edvard Munch, and the notoriously elusive Caravaggio. Their stories are filled with mystery, loss, rediscovery, and the strange ways history chooses to remember or forget. Chapel of St. Hubert, Château d'Amboise, France. Leonardo da Vinci was not merely a painter. He was an autonomist, an engineer, an architect, a botanist, a musician, and a military inventor. A mind so far ahead of his time that many of his designs for flying machines and hydraulic systems would not be built for centuries. He painted the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, and left thousands of pages of notes on everything, from the flight of birds to the structure of the human heart. In 1516, at the age of 64, Leonardo accepted an invitation from French King Francis I to come to Loire Valley. The king gave him the Château de Clois-Lucé in Amboise, a pension, and a glorious title: premier painter, engineer, and architect to the king. Leonardo spent his final 3 years there, beloved, comfortable, and still drawing. He died on May 2, 1519. He asked to be buried in the church of the Saint Florentin within the grounds of the Château d'Amboise. He was, but then the French Revolution came. The church was demolished, first ransacked, then sold off stone by stone, and Leonardo's grave was lost for 150 years. In 1863, skeletal remains were discovered in the ruins of the site. A scholar identified them, tentatively as Da Vinci's, though that identification has never been definitive. The remains were moved to the Chapel of St. Hubert, a delicate Gothic chapel on the grounds of the chateau, where they rest today beneath a tombstone installed in 1930. Here lies what may be Leonardo da Vinci, or may not be. Even in death, he keeps his secrets. Westerkerk, Amsterdam, Netherlands. Or nowhere. Rembrandt van Rijn was the greatest master of light in Western painting, a Dutch Golden Age painter whose portraits and self-portraits explored the human soul with unprecedented psychological depth. His Night Watch, his biblical scenes, his unflinching late self-portraits painted as his face aged and his fortunes collapsed. They remain among the most powerful works ever made. And yet Rembrandt died in poverty. He had been a celebrated and wealthy artist in his prime, but bankruptcy, personal losses, and the deaths of nearly everyone he loved left him broken. His wife Saskia died young. His partner Hendrakia died of the plague. His son Titus, who had worked as his art dealer, died at 27, just months before his own father. Rembrandt died on October 4, 1669 in Amsterdam, utterly alone. He was buried 4 days later in a rented unmarked grave inside the Westerkerk West Church, the great Protestant church near his last apartment on the Rozengracht Canal. Because the grave was a rental for the poor, 20 years after his death his remains were exhumed by the church and discarded, likely thrown into a communal pit, as was customary. The exact location of his original grave was never recorded. The number was simply lost. The man who painted over 300 self-portraits, one of the most documented faces of all Western art, has no grave. Today, only a memorial plaque on the north wall of the Westerkerk, modeled on the detail from the Night Watch, marks the place where he was once briefly interred. Every year on his birthday, flowers are hung there. St. John the Baptist Byzantine Catholic Cemetery, Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, USA. Andy Warhol transformed everyday objects, a soup can, a celebrity face, a disaster photograph, into high art, and in doing so, he invented pop art as we know it. He ran the factory, a silver-painted studio where art, film, and fame emerged into something entirely new. He was shot and nearly killed by radical feminist Valerie Solanas in 1968 and survived, only to die unexpectedly on February 22, 1987 from cardiac arrhythmia, following routine gallbladder surgery. He was 58. He was buried in St. John the Baptist Byzantine Catholic Church in Bethel Park, a suburb of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a quiet conventional Catholic church where his parents were already buried. For a man who built a career on access, spectacle, and the cult of celebrity, the grave is strikingly plain. No giant Campbell's soup cans, no silver balloons, just a simple flat stone beside his mother and father. But then there are the details only the devoted would know. The grave is live-streamed 24 hours a day by the local Byzantine Catholic Church. Warhol, who was famously obsessed with fame and death his entire career, watched endlessly from beyond. Fans leave all kinds of offerings: dollar bills, interview magazines, Polaroids, soup cans. Someone once left a silver wig. At his burial, his colleague and friend Paige Powell tucked a copy of Interview magazine and a bottle of the perfume Beautiful into his casket. And in a final perfect irony, the man who once said, "I never think that people die, they just go to Maxim's in Paris," is buried in a Pittsburgh suburb he spent his whole career escaping from. Voivode Our Savior's Cemetery, Oslo, Norway. Edvard Munch was the painter of anguish, a Norwegian symbolist and expressionist whose work reached directly into the human psyche and pulled out what it found there. His 1893 canvas, The Scream, depicting a figure on a bridge dissolving in a torment of existential dread beneath a blood-red sky, has become one of the most recognized images in the history of Western art. But Munch was far more than that single picture. His entire body of work, his sick child, his Madonna, his vast Freeze-of-Life project was a sustained meditation on love, death, anxiety, and the terror of being alive. Munch's life matched his ardent darkness. His mother and sister both died of tuberculosis when he was a child. He struggled with alcoholism and mental breakdowns. He shot himself accidentally during an argument, losing a finger on his left hand. He spent much of his later life in a deliberate isolation at his estate in Ikeli, outside Oslo. Surrounded by over 20,000 works of art he had accumulated and hoarded like a man who trusted no one else to protect them. He died on January 23, 1944 at the age of 80, but not in peace. Norway was under Nazi occupation, and Munch had spent his final years in genuine terror that the Nazis would confiscate his collection. They had already deemed his paintings degenerate art and removed 82 of them from German museums. When he died, the Nazi government, the very regime that had condemned his work, staged and orchestrated his funeral, creating the grotesque impression among Norwegians that Munch had been a Nazi sympathizer. He was not. It was the final act of appropriation against a man who had spent his life painting, what no government could control. He's buried in Voivode Our Savior's Cemetery in central Oslo, not far from the childhood neighbors he had haunted. Beneath a stone bust of himself, his own face watching over the grave. In his will, he bequeathed his entire estate to the city of Oslo. Over 1,000 paintings, more than 15,000 prints, thousands of drawings, and his personal writings. The Munch Museum opened in 1963. He gave everything away. Hietzing Cemetery, Vienna, Austria. Gustav Klimt was the painter of Gold and Desire, an Austrian symbolist who co-founded the Vienna Succession in 1897 and became the defining visual voice of the fin d'un siècle. His work shimmered with Byzantine mosaic patterns, erotic tension, and philosophical weight. The Kiss. Two figures entwined in a golden field, suspended between earth and void, is one of the most reproduced paintings in the world. His portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer L., confiscated by the Nazis and later restituted to the sitter's family, sold in 2006 for $135 million, then the highest price ever paid for a painting at auction. Klimt died on February 6, 1918 in Vienna at the age of 55, a death made more poignant by its timing. On January 11th, he suffered a stroke that paralyzed his right side. He recovered enough to be moved to the hospital, then contracted pneumonia in the midst of the catastrophic Spanish flu epidemic that was already beginning to devastate Europe. He died with several canvases left unfinished on his easels, including a portrait whose sitter who had left Vienna because of the war and had never returned to give him the final sitting. He was buried 3 days later at Hietzing Cemetery, next to the Schönbrunn Palace grounds, in the same district of Vienna where he had kept his last studio, alongside his mother, per his wishes. Among those who attended were composer Arnold Schoenberg, architect Joseph Hoffmann, and designer Koloman Moser, who would himself be dead by October of the same year. It was a year of losses. Otto Wanker, Klimt's colleague and Vienna's great architect, also died in 1918 and is buried just a few steps away from the same cemetery. The grave itself is, as one visitor put it, a contrast to Klimt's gargantuan life and artistic style, a plain, modest square slab bearing only his name. No gold, no ornament, no pattern. Nearby, the Vienna State Opera Ensemble sang Schubert's Litany for the Feast of All Souls at the burial service. In 1923, the city of Vienna designated it as an honorary grave. His family had already renounced it. They could not afford to keep it. Trinitatis Friedhof, Trinity Cemetery, Dresden, Germany. Caspar David Friedrich painted solitude the way other artists painted crowds. A German romantic working in the early 19th century, he created landscapes of profound spiritual quiet. Lone figures standing with their backs to us, gazing into infinity, fog rolling over mountain peaks, Gothic ruins dissolving into mid-lit forests, a single ship frozen in Arctic ice. His paintings do not describe nature. They use nature as a language for the inexpressible. Wander Above the Sea of Fog, 1818. with its solitary figure surveying an abyss of clouds, has become the defining image of the romantic individual confronting the sublime. Friedrich spent most of his life in Dresden, painting the landscape of Saxony and the Baltic coast with a visionary intensity that his own era increasingly failed to understand. By the 1830s, the Romantic movement have shifted, fashions have changed, and his work stopped selling. 2 strokes left him nearly paralyzed. He died on May 7, 1840, at the age of 65 in poverty. Largely forgotten by the art world he once electrified, his death, one account noted, was little noticed within the artistic community. He's buried in Dresden's Friedhof Trinity Cemetery, the entrance to which he had himself painted some 15 years earlier in the canvas called Cemetery Entrance, depicting the same gate pillars now standing over his own approach to the grave. His current grave slab is simple and flat, redesigned in 1934 by the Saxon Heritage Society, which recognized the injustice of what had been there before. There is a peculiar, characteristically Friedrich-like symmetry to his resting place. The man who spent his career painting the mystery of thresholds of figures standing at the edge of the known world and gazing into the unknown is buried in the cemetery he once painted as a vision of that very passage. His reputation was rediscovered in 1906 and has never dimmed since. Church of Sant'Erasmo, Porto Accoli, Tuscany, Italy. Probably, Michelangelo Merci da Caravaggio was the most dangerous painter in history, not metaphorically, but literally. In 1606, he killed a man in the street brawl in Rome and fled the city under a papal death sentence, beginning 4 years of frantic, brilliant exile across Naples, Malta, Sicily, and back to Naples again. During that time, wanted and hunted, sleeping in his clothes, moving constantly, he painted some of the most powerful canvases of his career. Darker, rawer, more desperate than anything that came before. Art historians have called the work he produced in exile the Confessions of a Condemned Man. He was making his way back to Rome in the summer of 1610. When word arrived that Pope Paul V was prepared to grant him a pardon, arranged through the intercession of Cardinal Scipione Borghese, he never arrived. On July 18, 1610, Caravaggio died in the small coastal town of Porto Accoli on the Tuscan coast at the age of 38. The cause of death has never been confirmed. Accounts from the time cite fever. Later theories have proposed sunstroke, syphilis, a staphylococcus infection, or lead poisoning. His bones were found to contain toxic levels of lead, likely absorbed over decades of handling lead-based pigments. Some historians have argued he was murdered. His grave was never marked. He was buried in the local San Sebastiano Cemetery, which was converted into a public park in the 1950s. The bones were transferred to a communal crypt in the Church of Sant'Erasmo. In 2010, a team of researchers from 4 Italian universities sifted through some 200 sets of bones in the crypt and identified one set, skull fragment, femur, 2 jaw pieces, as matching Caravaggio's profile with approximately 85% certainty. The right age, the right period, the right height, toxic levels of lead, and DNA compatible with living relatives in Caravaggio's hometown. The bones were displayed in a glass case on a red silk cushion. A memorial tomb was later constructed in Porto Accoli's town center, which many locals reportedly found too grand for a man whose life had been so speculatively dissolute. He painted darkness and light like no one before or since. He died in the dark, and for 400 years, no one knew exactly where. 14 artists, 14 different endings. Some beautiful, some heartbreaking, some mysterious, some quietly defiant. What they all share is that the work outlasted the person. The paintings are still here, the sculptures still stand, and somewhere in the world, there is always a grave being visited, a flower being laid, and the stranger is standing silently, wondering what it was like to see the world the way they did. Perhaps that's why so many artists' graves are surprisingly simple, no matter how brightly a person shone during their lifetime. Death eventually levels the playing field for everyone. What remains is not fame, wealth, or status, but the impact they had on others. And only the people whose hearts have been touched by the creative legacy of these artists make these resting places meaningful and a reminder of the lives once lived. We don't know what awaits us after death. We won't take our paintings, possessions, or achievements with us, but perhaps we continue to exist in another way, as long as our stories are remembered, as long as there's a hand to place a flower on a gravestone, or, maybe even a soup can. Who did I forget to mention? Are there other artists whose final resting places you like to learn about? And have you ever visited any of these graves yourself? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.